I walked into my family's kitchen without knocking, evidence folder in my hands, and watched my sister-in-law's face change when I opened it to the first page. The smell of coffee and burnt toast hung in the air. My brother sat frozen across from me, fork halfway to his mouth. I started reading the numbers out loud, not shouting, not crying, just stating facts. $18,000, $22,000, $12,000. Credit accounts I'd never opened, all in my name, all traced back to this address. The house she'd been living in for 6 years. The house she'd just given me 30 days to vacate. When I flipped to the final page and placed the deed on the table between the coffee cups, she went completely silent. For the first time in 12 years, Glenda had nothing to say. The title holder's name was printed clearly. Mine, not my brother's, not joint ownership, just mine. And in that kitchen silence, I finally understood what power felt like when you stopped giving it away. But let me start from the beginning, from the moment I first realized something was wrong. Thank you for being here. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a quick comment. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you loved? Your voice matters in this space. Quick note: some details in this story have been adjusted for storytelling, but the message about boundaries and self-protection is what truly matters. The text from Glenda arrived at 9:47 on a Monday morning, 3 lines that rewrote everything I thought I understood about family. At 45, I'd spent 2 decades building spreadsheets that told other people's financial stories. I just never thought to read my own. That morning, I was deep in a quarterly forecast for a manufacturing client when my phone buzzed against the desk. I glanced at the screen without thinking, the way you do when you're used to interruptions that don't actually matter. This one did. Vaughn and I have decided. We need the house for our family. You have 30 days to make arrangements. I read it twice, not because I didn't understand the words, but because I was trying to locate the part where she'd asked. There wasn't one. Glenda Shelton, 47, had introduced herself as an interior designer when she married my brother 12 years ago, though I'd never once seen a client. Now she was informing me, not requesting, informing that I needed to leave the house our parents had left behind. Our family, I said aloud to the empty apartment. As if I'd ever been part of that calculation, I closed the spreadsheet without saving. The formula could wait. I stood up, walked to my desk drawer, and pulled out a folder I hadn't opened in 6 years, the estate documents. When our parents died, the attorney had handled everything with the kind of efficiency that made grief slightly more bearable. I'd signed where she told me to sign, filed what she told me to file, and trusted that the people who loved me were taking care of the details I was too numb to manage. I'd assumed the house went to Vaughn. He was older, he was married, he had roots in Richardson while I'd moved to Dallas for work. It made sense that he'd inherit the family home. I'd never questioned it. I built my career on verifying numbers, I whispered, spreading the documents across my kitchen table. Why had I never verified this? The deed was 3 pages in. Recorded October 2019, 6 months after the funeral. Property address: the house in Richardson where my brother and his wife had been living ever since. Title holder, clearly printed in that unmistakable legal font, Nora Shelton, not Vaughn Shelton, not joint ownership, just my name, alone. I sat down slowly, still holding the page. They've been living in my house for 6 years, and treating me like the guest. How many other truths had I accepted without reading the fine print? I thought about the last time I'd been home. 3 months ago, a Sunday dinner where Glenda had rearranged the furniture in what used to be my mother's living room. We're finally making this place ours, she'd said, smiling like she was doing me a favor by updating the decor. I folded the deed carefully and slid it back into the folder. Then I opened my laptop, not to return to the forecast, not to finish the work I'd been doing when her message arrived. I navigated to my bank's website and clicked on the link I hadn't touched in 2 years. Pull full credit report. If they'd lied about the house, what else had I never thought to verify? The credit report loaded in sections, each one appearing like evidence I'd been too careful not to look for. 11 accounts total. 8 of them I recognized: my mortgage, 2 credit cards I actually used, utilities, the car loan I'd paid off 3 years ago, 3 I'd never seen before in my life. The first one stopped me cold. A credit card opened March 2021. Limit: $18,000. Current balance: $16,400. I stared at the date, trying to place myself in March 4 years ago. March 2021, I said aloud. I was working the Henderson audit. I would have noticed a credit inquiry, but there it was. Account open, payments made every month since. Always the minimum, always on time. Just enough to keep it in good standing. Just enough to stay invisible. Someone had been using this card for 4 years, racking up charges I'd never seen, making payments I'd never authorized, keeping the whole thing pristine enough that no flags were raised. Unless someone already had everything they needed. I scrolled down. The second account appeared, and my stomach dropped further. Line of credit: $22,000. Opened May 2023. Status: closed. Not closed because it was paid off. Closed because whoever opened it had maxed it out and walked away. The balance had been transferred somewhere, absorbed into some other financial black hole I probably hadn't found yet. The closed account, I whispered. They'd used it up and discarded it like a burner phone. The third account was still active. Store credit, $12,000 limit. Opened April 2024. Current balance, $8,200. I did the math automatically the way I always did. 18,000 plus 22,000 plus 12,000. $52,400 in credit opened in my name without my knowledge. 4 years. She'd been doing this for 4 years. I pulled up the transaction history on the first card, scrolling through months of charges, restaurants, clothing stores, home improvement. The amounts varied, but the timing didn't. I opened a second window, pulled up my own bank statements and laid them side by side. There it was. The pattern I'd been trained my entire career to spot. Every charge on the fraudulent card appeared within 72 hours of my paycheck hitting my account. Not random, not occasional. Every single bi-weekly deposit I received was followed within 3 days by activity on at least one of these cards. They'd been watching my paycheck like clockwork. For 4 years. Someone knew exactly when my direct deposit posted. Someone was tracking my income like it was their own, waiting for the money to clear, then spending accordingly. This wasn't opportunistic fraud, this was surveillance. I scrolled to the account details section, the part most people never look at: billing address, contact phone number. The first account listed an address in Richardson, Texas. I recognized it immediately: the family home. The house that was legally mine but where my brother and his wife had been living. Registered phone number, a cell I didn't recognize at first. Then I did. Glenda's. I sat in the dark for an hour after finding her number, phone in my hand, deciding what to do with what I knew. The evidence was there. But evidence wasn't the same as understanding. I needed to know if my brother was part of this, or just blind to it. I called Vaughn at 8 that evening. Not to confront him. To listen. My brother Vaughn, 50, had always been the kind of man who'd rather fix a broken step than a broken system. He answered on the second ring, voice easy. Hey, he said. What's up? I kept my tone light. Asked about work, about the weather in Richardson. Surface-level conversation we'd been having for years. Then I dropped it casual as mentioning a grocery list. Hey, I was looking at my credit report today, I said. Saw a weird charge, some debt in my name. You know anything about that? The question was designed like an audit. If he's innocent, I thought he'll ask which account, how much, when it started. Silence. 1 second. 2, 3. Long enough to count. Long enough to know he wasn't confused. He was deciding which version of the truth to give me. Not the silence of surprise, the silence of calculation. 3 seconds. That's all it took to know. Huh, he said finally, voice careful. Probably just a bank error or something. You know how those systems mess up sometimes. I closed my eyes. He didn't ask which account, I thought. He didn't ask how much. He kept talking, filling the space where questions should have been. Suggested I call the credit bureau tomorrow. Probably just a clerical thing. These things happen. The tone of someone offering reassurance about a problem he already knew existed. What he didn't do: ask what kind of debt. Express concern, offer to help, sound surprised. His voice wasn't confused. It was cautious, the sound of someone who knew enough to avoid knowing more. Just call them tomorrow, he said. They'll fix it. These things happen. Yeah, I said. Thanks. I ended the call. Sat there in the dark, phone still in my hand. Not ignorance, I whispered. Choice. He'd chosen not to ask. Chosen not to know the details. Chosen, for however long this had been happening, to look the other way while his wife systematically stole from his sister. I didn't move for a full minute. Then I opened my laptop. Not the credit report this time. My email archive. The family folder where I filed messages without really reading them, the way you do when you trust the people sending them. I typed into the search bar, Glenda plus credit. Pressed enter, waited to see what I'd missed. The search took less than a second. 14 results loaded onto the screen, every single one from Glenda to Vaughn. Every single one containing my name and the word salary. I clicked on the oldest one first. March 2022. Subject line, budget planning. The email was brief, businesslike, no greeting, no pleasantries. Nora's salary hits the 15th. I'll coordinate timing accordingly. Not a request, not a question. A notification. The language was logistical, transactional, like she was scheduling a delivery. I checked the date again. March 2022, I whispered. The same month the first credit card was opened. I scrolled to the next one. June 2022, subject, household finances. Her direct deposit posts Friday morning. We should move by Saturday. Then September. Then December. I kept reading, clicking through them chronologically. 14 emails spanning 3 years, all following the exact same format. Glenda informing Vaughn when my paycheck would clear. Coupling it with plans. Never asking permission. Never framing anything as an emergency or a temporary need. June 2023. Nora's salary posted yesterday. Finalizing the line of credit today. April 2024. Her paycheck clears tomorrow. Store card approved, ready to activate. Confirmations. Status updates. The tone you'd use with a business partner. Not a husband you were asking for help. My income was their calendar, I said to the empty apartment. Their hunting schedule. I was a line item in their budget. A renewable resource. I went back to the beginning and checked Vaughn's replies. Most of the emails had none. He'd read them, filed them, said nothing. 2 had responses. The first from August 2022 showed a single word, okay. The second, from January 2024, fine, that was it. No questions. No, why do you need to know when she gets paid? No, what are you planning to do with this information? No, should we talk to her about this? Just acceptance. Passive, silent, complete. He could have asked why, I whispered. He could have said no. He said nothing. 3 years of emails. 3 years of his wife tracking my income, like a bank statement she had every right to monitor. 3 years of him choosing not to see what was right in front of him. Choosing not to ask questions that might require him to do something uncomfortable. This wasn't ignorance. It wasn't being tricked or manipulated. It was complicity given through carefully chosen blindness. I closed the email window. Sat there for a moment, hands resting on the keyboard. Then I opened a new search tab. If the house was in my name, if someone had been systematically stealing my identity for years, I needed to know what that meant legally. I needed someone who understood both property law and fraud. I typed, Helene Griffin, attorney Richardson TX. The lawyer who'd handled my parents' estate 6 years ago. Who'd walked me through probate when I was too numb with grief to process half of what she was saying. Who'd made everything feel manageable when nothing else did. Her website loaded. Law office in downtown Dallas. Estate planning, property law, civil litigation. A phone number. I picked up my phone and saved the contact. Tomorrow, first thing. I'd call her tomorrow. The attorney's office smelled like old leather and expensive decisions. Helene Griffin, 58, had handled my parents' estate with a kind of efficiency that made grief slightly more bearable. Now she sat across from me reviewing the documents I'd brought, the utility bills, the account statements, the property records. The house is yours, she said, sliding the deed back across her mahogany desk. Your parents transferred ownership to you in March 2019. Full quitclaim deed, properly filed with Dallas County. Glenda has zero legal claim to this property. I felt something unclench in my chest. And the credit accounts? Helene's expression hardened. 3 fraudulent accounts opened in your name constitutes identity theft under Texas Penal Code 3251. We're looking at felony charges if prosecuted, 2 to 10 years per count, plus potential fines up to $10,000. She's my sister-in-law, I said quietly. She's a criminal, Helene corrected. The relationship doesn't change the law. My recommendation, freeze your credit immediately at all 3 bureaus. Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Cut off her access completely. Then we decide whether to confront or press charges. What would you do? I asked. Gather every shred of evidence first, she said. Document everything. Screenshot every transaction. Then confront from a position of absolute certainty. People like this don't confess easily. You need proof they can't deny. Before I freeze my credit and cut her off completely, let me ask, if you discovered this kind of systematic betrayal, would you confront immediately or gather more evidence first? Comment your choice and why. Because what happened next proved timing is everything. Quick reminder. This story includes some dramatized elements to highlight the emotional reality of financial manipulation. I left Helene's office and went straight home. The credit freeze process was surprisingly simple. 3 websites, 3 security questions, 3 confirmations. Equifax took 4 minutes. Experian took 3. TransUnion took 5 because their site kept timing out. Each bureau generated a unique PIN. I stored them in a password manager Glenda would never access. The freeze went into effect immediately. 75 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an alert from Credit Karma. Application for Target Red Card declined. Insufficient credit access. I pulled up the details. Application timestamp 3:47 p.m. IP address geolocation Richardson, Texas. My parents' old house. The family home where Glenda currently lived rent-free in my property. She'd tried to open another account before my attorney meeting was even cold. I sat there staring at the declined application. And something shifted in my understanding. This wasn't opportunistic fraud, someone seeing an opportunity once. This was systematic, calculated, ongoing. She'd been monitoring my credit like a hawk, opening accounts the moment she thought she could get away with it. And now she knew something had changed. By Friday evening, every piece of paper that mattered was spread across my desk in 3 distinct piles. The declined Target application had been Glenda's first mistake. Trying to open an account while I was still driving home from Helene's office. It proved she'd been watching my credit constantly, waiting for opportunities. Now I was building something she couldn't talk her way out of. The first pile, financial. 3 credit account statements showing Macy's opened March 2023, Discover opened September 2024, Capital One opened January 2025. Total fraudulent charges, $52,400. The Credit Karma screenshot from Thursday showing the declined attempt, IP address traced to Richardson, Texas. The second pile, intent. 14 emails spanning 2022 through 2025. Each one pushing harder about the house. IP address logs showing multiple login attempts from her location. Utility bills in her name at my property address. The third pile, ownership. The quitclaim deed from March 2019 with my parents' signatures, their will naming me sole beneficiary. Helene's verification letter confirming zero ambiguity in the chain of title. Financial, intent, ownership, I said to my empty apartment. Everything they took, everything they planned, everything they forgot was mine. I pulled a manila folder from my desk drawer and began transferring documents in order. Tab dividers between sections. Each page in a protective sleeve, professional, irrefutable. On the folder's last page, I picked up a pen, not typed, handwritten, and wrote in careful block letters, total $52,400. Not demanding repayment, but stops here. I stared at those words for a long time. I could have asked for every dollar. I could have destroyed them with criminal charges, civil damages, full restitution. Helene had outlined the path. Felony identity theft, 2 to 10 years per count, fines stacking into 6 figures. I could have buried them. I chose to free myself instead. The note wasn't forgiveness. It was a boundary written in permanent ink. They could keep the money they'd stolen, if it meant I never had to wonder whether they'd learned. Mercy with teeth. I know what you did. I have proof, and if you ever touch my life again, I will use it. I closed the folder and set it on my kitchen counter. Then I opened my laptop and booked a flight. Dallas to DFW, Saturday morning, 15. I screenshotted the confirmation and saved it to my phone. Day 28. 2 days before Glenda expected me gone. 2 days before her eviction deadline meant anything. Perfect timing. I didn't text Vaughn, didn't call to announce I was coming. I slid the folder into my carry-on bag and zipped it closed. Set my alarm for 5 a.m. Tomorrow I would walk into that house not as the evicted little sister, but as the legal owner with documentation she couldn't deny. No warning, no mercy call, just evidence and truth. At 10:47 p.m., my phone lit up on the nightstand. Vaughn, Glenda mentioned you've been really quiet this week. Everything okay with you? I read it twice. Glenda had noticed the silence and deployed him as reconnaissance. Strategic, careful, exactly what I'd expected. I set the phone down without replying. I walked into the kitchen at 9 on Saturday morning without knocking, folder in my hands, and sat down at the table, where they were having breakfast. Glenda Shelton, 47, had introduced herself as an interior designer when she married my brother 12 years ago, though I'd never once seen a client. She looked up from her coffee, expression shifting from surprise to something practiced. Perfect timing, she said. We really need to finalize your moving timeline. I'm not here to discuss timelines, I said. I placed the folder on the table between the coffee cups and opened it to the first page. Glenda stared at the official letterhead, the highlighted numbers, the legal formatting. I'm here to show you what I found. Vaughn sat across from me, fork frozen. He set it down and said nothing. I pulled the first document forward. Credit account 1. Opened March 14, 2021, in my name. Limit $18,000. Current balance $16,400. Glenda's hand moved toward the paper. Wait, this is. I didn't pause. Credit account 2. Line of credit, $22,000. Opened May 2023. Status. Closed after reaching maximum balance. You're taking this out of. Credit account 3. Store credit, $12,000. Opened April 2024. Current balance, $11,800. I looked up at her. Total, $52,400. All opened using my social security number. The kitchen went silent except for the refrigerator hum. Thursday afternoon, I continued. You tried to open a Target red card in my name. Declined because I'd frozen my credit that morning. Glenda's face lost its careful composure. This is a misunderstanding. We were helping you. IP address logs, I said, flipping to the next section. Every application originated from this address. Every number I spoke was a day I'd trusted them. Every date was a choice I hadn't known I was making. I turned to the email printouts. 14 emails over 3 years. All tracking when my paycheck hits. All sent to Vaughn. I slid one across the table. Subject line. Timing. I read it aloud. Nora's salary posts Friday. We'll coordinate timing accordingly. That's not. You're misunderstanding what those were about. I looked at Vaughn. He was staring at his plate, hands flat on the table. Not looking at Glenda. Not looking at me. You got every one of these, I said to him. You replied okay to 6 of them. His jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Glenda stood up fast enough that her chair scraped against the tile. This house belongs to Vaughn. He decides what happens here, not you. She turned to him, voice sharp. Tell her. Vaughn didn't move, didn't look up, didn't speak. The silence stretched between us, and I watched my brother choose nothing when he should have chosen truth. I reached for the last page in the folder and placed it on the table between us. The silence Vaughn had chosen still hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. Now I was going to give them both something they couldn't stay silent about. "This is the house deed," I said. "Mom and Dad left it to me, not Vaughn." The paper was official, formal, undeniable. Property address, the Richardson family home where we sat. Date recorded, October 2019. Title holder printed clearly in the county clerk's typeface, Nora Shelton. Not joint ownership. Not Vaughn's name anywhere on the page. Recorded 6 years ago, I continued. Never transferred. Legally mine since the day they died. Glenda stared at the document like it was written in a language she didn't understand. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. In 12 years, I'd never seen her without words. "The house you just told me to leave in 30 days, I said. Vaughn picked up the deed with both hands. I watched his eyes move across the title holder line once, twice, 3 times. He set it down carefully and looked at me, then at Glenda. His expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something that looked like horror. "You knew," he said to her, voice different now, flat and distant. "You knew it wasn't mine." Glenda's hand moved toward the paper, pulled back. "That can't, when did they?" "She's been living in my house," I said, still looking at Vaughn. "Spending my money. And telling me when to leave." Vaughn's face had gone pale. He kept staring at Glenda like he was seeing someone he'd never met. I stood up, closed the folder with a soft snap that seemed loud in the quiet kitchen. $52,400, I said. "I'm not asking for it back. But it stops here. I could have called the police, filed charges, destroyed them. I chose to tell the truth instead." "You needed to know what you chose not to see," I said to Vaughn. "That's why I came." He looked up at me, and I saw something break behind his eyes. The careful construction he'd built to avoid knowing things that would require action. Glenda finally found her voice. "We can explain this. There's context you don't." "I love you," I said to Vaughn, cutting her off. "That's why I'm standing here instead of my attorney." I picked up the folder and walked toward the kitchen door. My footsteps on the tile floor were the only sound. Neither of them followed me. I walked to my car without looking back. Started the engine, pulled out of the driveway. The morning was cold and clear, the kind of October Saturday that felt like possibility. My phone sat silent in the passenger seat. No calls, no texts, no attempts to explain or apologize or demand I come back. Just the road ahead and the folder on the seat beside me. Evidence of everything that had just ended. I drove back to Dallas with the windows down, cold air rushing through the car, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Free. The messages started coming that evening and didn't stop for 5 days. I drove back to Dallas feeling lighter than I had in years. But the silence only lasted until sunset. My phone lit up at 8:47 p.m. Saturday with a first text from Glenda. "You had no right to humiliate us like that in our own home." I read it twice, set the phone down, didn't reply. Sunday brought 2 more messages, both variations on the same theme. Anger wrapped in righteousness. I swiped the notifications away. Monday morning, the tone shifted. Those emails were taken completely out of context. "This is a misunderstanding." Denial then. The predictable next stage. I was reading her messages the way I used to read quarterly reports. Observing data, noting patterns, drawing no conclusions. Tuesday, silence. Wednesday, 3 texts in an hour. "Please, we're family. We can fix this if you'd just answer your phone." Pleading now. Desperation bleeding through the careful words. Each message showed me exactly where she was in losing control. Anger, denial, bargaining. I wondered if she'd make it all the way through or stop somewhere in the middle. I didn't respond to any of them. Not from anger or spite. Those conversations simply weren't mine to have anymore. I'd said what needed saying. What they did with it was theirs to figure out. Some conversations you leave. Others you just stop having. This was the second kind. Thursday evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Vaughn. I picked it up expecting explanation or defense or anger. 2 words. "I'm sorry." I sat on my couch and read those 2 words 3 times. Not parsing for subtext, just sitting with them. 2 words, I whispered. After everything. Maybe that's all there is to say. Some apologies need to exist in silence before they can be answered. Maybe this one deserved a response eventually. But not yet. Not while I was still figuring out what forgiveness looked like when the damage was this deep. I'll answer him, I thought. Eventually. When I know what to say back. Friday morning at 8:15 a.m., my phone buzzed with the notification I'd been waiting for without realizing it. Direct deposit received. $6,923. I stared at the screen for 30 seconds, waiting. No call, no text asking if it cleared, no message coordinating timing. Just my salary, landing in my account, staying exactly where it belonged. First paycheck in 4 years with no surveillance. No invisible hands reaching into my finances the moment the money arrived. No call, no check-in, no coordination, I said to my empty apartment, just my money mine. The silence where anxiety used to live now felt like space, room to breathe. This is what normal feels like, I whispered. I'd almost forgotten. I made coffee and opened my laptop, not to check my accounts again, not to document anything new, just to work. The same spreadsheets I'd been building for 2 decades, except this time when my salary hit my account, it stayed exactly where it landed. Mine. 3 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon that felt like any other, I was building a quarterly forecast when my phone lit up with Vaughn's name. The last 3 weeks had been quieter than any I could remember. Normal felt strange at first, like wearing shoes that fit after years of blisters. Now it just felt like breathing. I picked up the phone. Been working with a counselor. Vaughn's message read. Don't know where Glenda and I will end up yet, but I reread all those emails you showed us. Every single one. I scrolled down. I'm sorry I chose not to see what was right in front of me. I set the phone on my desk and stared at that word chose. Not failed to see, not missed, not didn't understand, chose. He's learning the difference, I said quietly. That one word meant he was actually working on it, not just apologizing to smooth things over. He was in counseling, rereading the evidence, recognizing that ignorance had been a decision, not an accident. I picked up the phone and read his message 3 more times. Then I typed carefully, deleting and rewriting twice. You don't apologize for not seeing. You apologize for choosing not to ask. Those are different. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The lesson I'd learned over months of spreadsheets and credit reports, distilled into 2 sentences. This was what teaching looked like, not explaining every detail, just naming the truth and letting them decide what to do with it. Maybe he'll understand, I whispered. Maybe he won't. But I said what was true. Boundaries don't punish, they protect. And sometimes they give people permission to become better. The boundary I'd drawn hadn't destroyed our relationship. It had given him space to figure out what kind of brother he wanted to be. That was all I could do. The rest was his work. I set the phone aside and returned to my spreadsheet. The quarterly forecast looked exactly like it always had. Columns of numbers, projections, seasonal variations. This wasn't a perfect ending. Vaughn's marriage was uncertain. Glenda hadn't contacted me since that Wednesday plea. Our family was fractured in ways that might never fully heal. But it was an honest ending. Not perfect, I said, fingers resting on my keyboard. Not healed, but honest and mine. The spreadsheet on my screen, Twain financial story, now only mine. No unauthorized accounts, no coordinated timing, no surveillance disguised as concern. Just numbers that represented choices I'd made, money I'd earned, a life I was building one decision at a time. I took a sip of coffee, now cold, but that was fine. The quarterly forecast could wait another minute. Outside, late November sunlight filtered through my window, warming the corner of my desk. And somewhere in Richardson, my brother was learning what I'd had to teach myself. That love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's just permission to stay lost. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're doors that show who's willing to walk through them the right way. Looking back, my biggest mistake wasn't trusting my family. It was thinking love meant never asking questions or protecting myself. I spent 4 years ignoring warning signs because I didn't want to believe someone I loved could hurt me. Don't make my mistake. Trust but verify. Love but with boundaries that protect your peace. This wasn't a typical revenge story. You might have expected a grandma revenge tale full of dramatic payback, but real accountability looks different. This wasn't about grandma revenge or getting even. It was about setting boundaries. I didn't destroy Glenda or even demand my money back. I simply told the truth. I believe God allowed me to discover this when I did. His timing was perfect. The lesson isn't about revenge stories ending in confrontation. It's about choosing protection over punishment, teaching over destruction. Real revenge stories in life aren't about payback. They're about refusing to participate in your own harm anymore. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-protection? What would you have done differently? Please consider subscribing to hear more stories about boundaries, family, and finding your voice. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share it with them. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means more to me than you know. Final note. While this story contains fictionalized elements for storytelling, the lessons about boundaries and self-worth are very real. You deserve relationships that honor your worth.